Alani.
Bill Englund,
Here.
Bill John Baker, Harley Buzzard,
Here.
Joe Crittenden,
Here.
Jody Fishingham,
Here.
Janelle Fulbright, here, Don Garvin, China Glory Jordan, David Thornton. We do have a quorum.
And does anyone want to add, just as procedure?
I would add myself today.
If there's no objections, do I hear a second?
Second.
And all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. So Chuck Hoskins just added. And before we go any further, Mr. Hoskins, would you please do us?
Lord, thank you for this beautiful day and this opportunity for Cherokee people to come together. Help us do the people's work. Help us do your work. Help us remember there's a lot of conflict and pain in this world, and help us bring some peace and comfort to it. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. The only business we have is to continue on, and if you'll go to section 25, where it was tabled for the filing of complaints by Indians. And Mr. Hembry, would you like to present that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Section 25 would, the amendment was to strike Section D and replace with a new Section D. The portion that would be strike would be, this title does not provide any cause of action for employees of the Cherokee Nation, its entities, or wholly owned corporation. That language would be stricken. The language that would be added would be TERO vendors or employees shall be able to bring complaints against the Cherokee Nation Enterprises, Cherokee Nation Industries, and any other entities of the Cherokee Nation. And we define each of those entities in the definition portion of the Act.
So does the body want to bring this off the table at this time?
Chair, can I address the body?
Yes, please come forward, Chief Smith.
Thank you, Chair Alan Watts. We've had discussions for some period of time. If you recall, we were on a conference call, and I asked you and I asked other folks to send me the complaints that they had. And you were quite diligent in giving my cell phone number out. So I got a whole bunch of them.
We appreciate your availability to the Cherokee people, too, Chief Smith.
Absolutely. I'm glad you put my Social Security number out there, too. I can go into details of the 6 or 8 people I talked to. I had a couple of other folks I had staff talk to. Then Councilman Buzzard, he gave me a whole list of folks, so we had to talk to them. We sent them a letter asking them for their complaints or issues on the TERO. And basically, what I found, and I think Diane Kelly's here, and we can actually provide some evidence that the body would permit us to do that next time, because I haven't assembled it in a report, is that almost without exception, the place that is of issue is subcontracting by generally Flintco, because they're the biggest contractor we have. And sometimes it's whether it's retainage for the agreements by the subcontractors provided for retainage until the job was completely over or until the subcontractor's work was over. And if we understand what retainage is, it's sort of like something we hold back to make sure the job gets done according to the specs. If it's dirt work or concrete and the contract provides that retainage is held until the entire project is done, well then that dirt work, that concrete guy, his retainage is held up for a couple of years until a big project is done. I visited with C&E, and Sean Slayton advised me that they've instituted a policy to review the retainages by all subcontractors and contractors on a quarterly basis to ensure that the retainages are not being held longer than necessary. Sometimes those retainages are governed by the contract between the subcontractor and the contractor, or even when there's a sub-sub, it's their agreement that determines when the retainage is paid to what amount. And so it's the real issue in all this is the relationship of the contractor and the subcontractor, almost without exception, for payment and for whether performance was done timely and whether an Indian subcontractor was available when a non-Indian got the job. And several of the complaints that I had were pre-2006, 2005, when Cherokee Nation instituted this one-stop shop in which people could go to a website for a physical place at one place and see all the contracts available. That took care of some of the complaints, because post that time, since 2006, we had very few complaints of that people didn't have a chance to bid. One other complainant was that he didn't get the bid as an Indian subcontractor, but he acknowledged that he didn't have the lowest bid. And he believed that since he was an Indian contractor, if he was close, he should get the bid. Well, there's a serious public policy there, is that if you don't give the bid to the best qualified, lowest bidder, then, as Councilman Anglin and Councilman Snell understand, then you won't have anybody bidding on it, because there's no incentive for people to put the work and effort into preparing a bid that they can live with if somebody else is going to be given the immediate opportunity to match their bid or to revise their bid. Plus, if we grant some kind of a point system or fudge factor or incentive, in essence what we end up doing is subsidizing a vendor. So of all the cases that we've looked at, there's really not a substantive issue with contract vendor payments for the Cherokee Nation, or actually C&E or C&I. The bread guy gets paid timely, the furniture guy gets paid timely, everybody gets paid timely. And there's very little dispute about application of Indian preference, because with those kind of commodities, it's just really a function of price. The product goes out, the bid specs go out, and the Indian contractors or vendors know how to bid it in. And so that's not usually the issue. The real issue has been construction and subcontractors in construction. None of the contractors or subcontractors have complained about the Cherokee Nation not paying time. It's only the subcontractors sometimes complain about the contractors, and subcontractors complaining that the contractor did not award them the Indian preference. So the real issue, I think, I'd invite the body to discuss, and David Stewart and Diane Kelly's here to, I think, will support what I've been able to personally analyze, is the area of concern is probably the managing of exceptions and conflicts at the subcontractor construction level. Part of that's been an issue in the last few years because we've had a huge construction boom. And C&E wasn't quite prepared to handle that construction boom and ensuring that TERO was complied with, and perhaps us ourselves. But we need to understand that that construction boom is over. All of our big projects are done. We're going to have some clinics in the future in the next 5 or 6 years. And we have some smaller projects, some $4 million kind of projects. And so those will not invoke the kind of subcontractor issues we've seen in the past. And I think a real critical question that we've addressed in the past is really what is the purpose of Indian preference. And we really ought to start using the proper words, because really what we're talking about here is Indian preference, not TERO. Actually, the history of TERO's Tribal Employment Rights Office was a way to help individuals pursue EEO claims against other firms. We at some time injected into that process, because it was easy to do, the idea of certifying Indian-owned firms So they would have a certification to apply for ARGent work or state work or federal work. So with the chair's indulgence, I think the real policy issue here is with Indian-owned businesses, they can only be 51%. And all they have to do to be an Indian-owned business is have one person with a blue card holding the 51%. And there's a host of businesses out there where the 51% owner never sees the work, and they don't hire Indians because there's no reason to. They use that 51% on a blue card to try to get an Indian preference. And the great interesting thing about this is the issue to subsidize all businesses, including the 51%ers, or is the real purpose of it to encourage Indian business to grow and really become sound businesses in and of themselves? If it's the latter, the Annanite has been, we have a one-stop shop, a business development center to help those people become more competitive, not only in our work, but in other work. And actually David Stewart was one who advocated that. And we've got a very successful office, I believe. But I'm getting to the real core point now, is that I think what I've heard the committee say, and lots of us say in the past, is the great value of Indian preference is sometimes a mistaken conclusion that Indian businesses will hire Indian folks. That's not always the case. Many times, non-Indian companies hire as many or more Indian folks at their crews than Indian-owned firms. And we can, from our own experience here in Tahlequah and Stillwell, the carpet layers, they're just about all Indian. And so you have a non-Indian floor covering place, he doesn't get the preference, but he's hired all Indians, and an Indian owner of maybe the floor covering place, or 51% of the card, he doesn't hire them. And so we're in a bit of a quandary. Is the great value of this Indian preference in contracting, is its great value hiring Indians? And so maybe we need to focus from creating more lucrative preferences for the business, but to create incentives and maybe penalties for hiring Indians by the subcontractors. And actually there's a process in place to do that already, to punish or to penalize people for not hiring Indian folks. But what we find, and I'd invite Mr. Overacker to challenge this assertion, is sometimes it's cheaper to pay the fine as a cost of doing business than to go out and find the Indian labor. And so a very easy way to remedy that is to create a stiffer fine or to create some kind of incentives on the front end of the contracting for actually hiring Indians. So I guess what I'm saying is that the Act as presented will not accomplish those ends. And I can go by detail and section by section and give you our analysis on it. But I believe if we focused, and I'd invite the chair to do this, if we had a bit of a focus group to really look at the issues of subcontracting and trying to create more of an incentive and penalty for hiring Indians, that would accomplish the goals that I think we all share. So I'd be glad to respond.
So does the committee have any questions for Chief Smith?
I just have some comments. I haven't heard so much on the retainage from people that's a complaint. The complaint I'm hearing is we're an Indian-owned firm and we don't get jobs. We never get to bid. I haven't heard anything much about the retainage, because usually I see the retainage being withheld from the general contractor. And you know, when I worked in the roads program, we never really got involved with the subcontractor that was doing the sub for the general. We always dealt with the general contractor, and he's the one we held the retainage on. And I don't know if he would held a retainage on the subcontractor or not. If that's the way CNE's doing it, I don't know that that's a good practice. Usually when a general contractor, he takes the job to get the job done 100%, then he hires his subs, and I don't know that it's fair for that general to withhold 10% on a subcontractor. To me, it ought to be up to the general to work that out, and I think they worked it out in between, but I never go that far as far as looking at the subs. But the complaint I heard is, you know, we've submitted bids after bids after bids, and we never get a job. They'll go in and they'll bid it, then they'll go back and they'll change the job out, and then they have to rebid it. It's almost like, well, we figured out something else we need to do, so we're going to rebid the job. A good example maybe is, I'm going to go back to this demolition over in Catoosa. I don't think it was done purposely or nothing like that, but what had happened over there, they put the bids up for demolition, then they went back and pulled those bids back, and they put a bid out to do the parking lots for asphalt. Well, most people that are in demolition don't do asphalt work, so that just completely knocks somebody out of a job. Now, I'm not saying to give a Indian-owned firm $100,000 break, no way, because, you know, I've seen that happen over the roads program, and we did not do the Indian preference because we had some laws that we could follow, but we didn't have to. But I haven't heard a whole lot. The statements I've heard is, you know, we bid on jobs, we just never get a job.
Well, that's why I think we need to review it, because this act won't deal with that. And what you're talking about is breaking apart the packages and make it more manageable for small folks. And so this act will not accomplish that. That's really a question of how do you manage a construction project. One of the things I think we could do, and I talked to David briefly about it, is actually have somebody that's an ombudsman or a person designated within CNE just to handle the Indian preference contract, because I know our TERO folks are over there and doing some advocacy, but to have somebody that's in a more proactive stance. Now, we also have to acknowledge that Flintco, who's been the big contractor on most of this stuff, has taken some efforts to become more proactive. They set up an Indian division, and one of the guys I spoke with who did dirt work for them was actually quite complimentary of Flintco, because they saw a dramatic change in how they were doing it. And that was Brian Adair from the Contact. I don't know what kind of work he does.
Concrete
Yeah.
work.
So he was pleased with the changes at Flintco with their advocacy efforts.
Councilman Buzzer, did you have additional questions or comments for the
Well,
chief?
can I go ahead and just make some comments that's kind of different than what the chief had talked about? But,
Please. And then I have Chuck Hoskins and then Bill Langlow.
just some things that I've heard through some contractors, I suppose, I'll put it that way, that on the bid opening processes, Flintco does not read the bids publicly. They take the bids in, and you know that's what they do. What they do is they go in and they evaluate the bids. What happens then is they evaluate the bids and they see who the TERO contractor is that put the bid in, and they give that TERO contractor 24 hours or so much time to come back and resubmit the bid. What some of the TERO contractors are telling me, they'd like to hear those bids read in the opening. But I said, well, I don't know how you could do that if you're going to have 24 hours to rebid. They said, well, what we'd like to do, and we get the 24 hours to rebid it, but then we'd still like to hear the bids open. That way they could know how low or how high they were to maybe next time adjust their contract.
Well, I think that's precisely the reason they shouldn't do it, because why should everybody else bid if they know whatever they spend, I don't know how many days or thousands of dollars preparing a bid, that it means nothing, because all they have to, the TERO contractor, he just puts in a bid for 10 times its worth and waits till the lowest bid comes in and say, well, I can match that.
No, what I'm saying is they don't open the bids the initial time when they come to get the bids in. They go in and review the bids.
Mm-hmm.
Then they give that TERO person a chance to come back and look at the bid again.
Mm-hmm.
After the TERO person resubmitted that bid, then they open the bids out and they open. What he's saying, what they're saying, that gives us an idea of where we need to be. If I'm, way up here, and the next time I
after
bid,
it's awarded?
Yeah, after the bid.
Well,
Well, not
okay.
awarded, but, yeah, well, I
Or
guess
announced
at
it.
the same time.
I don't
What
see
they
any
want to
problem
do is
with that.
compare those bids, you know. If-
See where they,
Yeah, see
how
where
good
they
they-
fell into the bid line.
well, I don't see a problem with that.
And I didn't either. I thought, well, that's probably a good idea because at least they'll know where they need to be looking at the next time and maybe go to their vendor that furnishes windows or doors and say, hey, you know, the price really gets too high. So, I don't know, that was just something that they threw out to me. The other thing, and we may be covered in some of this stuff here, and is preference, and you probably know this, Chief, that if our Indian TERO people go over to the Chickasaw Nation and bid, the Chickasaw people are going to get preference in the Chickasaw Nation. The other thing is on state contracts, if our TERO vendor or any vendor goes down in Texas, they're going to give an in-state bid. They're going to give preference to those contractors in the state. And I don't know where we are on our TERO list here.
Well, we actually find with the I think it's with the stimulus package, and Melanie might correct me, that the statutes have changed, that we can actually now provide a tribal preference. So that's one of the things we would like to discuss with the committee, instead of just an Indian preference, a tribal preference.
And I believe they told me that was the tribal preference that Chickasaw does use.
Well, if they're using their own cash, I mean, they can do what they want to, but when we use federal funds, hospitals and such, we would have to have that authorized by federal law.
Councilman Buzzer, did you have additional questions or comments?
No, I think that's the comments that I wanted to, bring forward.
Okay.
But thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Hoskin, and then Anglican and Thornton.
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate what you're saying, Chief, about Indian preference doesn't necessarily mean more Indian employees. You know, the federal government has preference for example, female-owned firms. But the goal there is not necessarily to employ more females, it's to encourage entrepreneurship among women. So to the extent our goal is to encourage entrepreneurship among Cherokee citizens, then it seems to me that ought to be a policy. But I also think with that we could incentivize the hiring of Cherokee citizens. But I guess I'm having trouble seeing where there's a conflict. Is there a conflict between a policy that gives Indian preference and a policy that encourages Indian employment? Because I don't know that we're really at odds.
They don't track each other 100%. And I'm not suggesting we take the Indian preference away. I'm saying that the goal of Indian employment can be reached probably easier and very simply by raising the fines or creating some kind of front-end incentive to hire Indian folks.
We couldn't do that, and what we're doing is, I guess, is what I'm suggesting. I mean, if we continue along the track that the subcommittee's on, but add to that stiffer fines, I mean, aren't we going to get to that goal?
Well, there's a lot of stuff in this particular bill that's not going to, doesn't address what the core problems are. There's a lot of stuff around it that creates bureaucracy and creates actually delays in actually getting some things done. Would you refer to David? He wanted to address
Yeah, if I could respond to that. The reason they don't track is because if the preference happens on the bidding side and the hiring happens after the bid is awarded, the protection of the bidding process and for us to keep competitive bids on the table and that whole economic system in place is really the important part to us. Because if we have preference, then we won't get people to bid, number one, because everyone will know that ultimately, those contractors will get to work no matter what, which increases cost, which decreases dividends, decreases profits. So I think protection of that bidding process is crucial, not only to the tribe to keep that business integrity, and then we can look at ways to influence Cherokee employment in other ways. And there are good models. I think the federal government has a model that is there that encourages, minority contracting goals. We could use those. But I think I would look at it from that bidding process. Just keeping that integrity is crucial to all of us as the guy that, is kind of steward of that. On that.
Just as a point of information, I totally disagree in how, if you read the current law as it is today, all, whether they're Indian or not, or TERO certified or not, require anyone other than core employees have Indian preference. Whether it's the subcontractor or the contractor or a vendor or any other service provider that is being hired by Cherokee money. That's the way I read it.
Well, I think what Dave is suggesting is that you can't automatically give a contract to somebody when they can see what everybody else has done.
Well, and I think that at the time of awarding, regardless of what the preference is for awarding, that is only that moment in time that captures. Really. So, but the law then goes further and says that any hiring other than core employees, and defines in core employees under the law, has to be hired under Indian preference.
And I introduced that concept earlier because what happens if you don't do that, you get fined. I don't know, it's $50 a day. And for some employers, it's worth paying $50 a day than spending the time, effort, and energy to go out and find Indian folks to bring them in. So the deal is that you can tweak fairly easy is raise that fine or create some front-end incentive.
And we talked about that last meeting, and I interrupted.
No, that's okay. I want to yield to Mr. Kimber.
Well, and you're right as to the rendition of the current law, but I think, and what I said earlier months ago in these subcommittees, the major change that is being proposed in this law is making TERO applicable to the Cherokee Nation and its entities. Now, if the law is adequate, if we need to raise fine, I think the core deal is, are we going to make Cherokee Nation applicable to TERO and its entities? And I think that's a big policy question that I'd like to hear comments on. Because the committee has made a decision, yes, it is going to apply.
Well, it applies now. We do it every day. We can report the Indian employment with our own entities. There's no question that there's Indian preference. And so that's never been an issue. We don't have data that says the administration or the council don't give Indian preference, or CNE or CNI. That's never been an issue. The issue is the controversies have been out of the entire environment, to say 100 complaints, 95 of them are going to be with subcontracting and construction. So that's my point, is that that's where we need to focus our energy rather than redesign systems where there's no significant problems.
Councilman Hoskins, did you have additional comments or questions?
So Chief, is the issue that Cherokee Nation and entities are in fact complying with the current TERO law, but it is also a fact that they're not under the TERO law for any means of enforcement? But I'm glad that they've complied, but the fact is there doesn't seem to be any teeth in it, and that's what I thought the committee was trying to accomplish.
Well, here's the danger there, is that we do it by policy. We do it because that's one of our ultimate goals. If you memorialize it in law, and you certainly appreciate this, is that then you create a cause of action. And I can tell you the chaos that will occur if you say an accounting employee has a cause of action, or the general public has a cause of action because they didn't get hired because they have an Indian preference right. No longer can we manage people, because what will happen anytime somebody gets looked at cross-eyed or gets demoted or gets disciplined, they can avoid the entire process. There's an employee appeals board, there's an administrative board in place to look at adverse personnel issues. So you undermine all that and create another tier saying, well, I'm Indian and the Cherokee Nation has discriminated because I'm Indian. And it just doesn't, that sometimes the old trial lawyers say that dog just don't hunt. It just don't make a lot of sense.
Please continue, Councilman Hoskins.
And I don't want to be dismissive of that concern. I mean, it's a familiar refrain among management that we, to the extent we layer on more rights, there's going to be more trouble with having to deal with the enforcement of those rights, and there's going to be frivolous claims, but there's also going to be non-frivolous claims. And I guess I'm not convinced that this additional layer is going to cause the chaos that you suggest, but particularly if there haven't been that many complaints, particularly if we have a system that can ferret out those frivolous complaints. So I don't want to be dismissive of your concerns, but I also don't want to be dismissive of this idea that there is in fact no enforcement right now, and perhaps we, based on the concerns we've heard, we need that.
See, I would have to disagree with you. Our employees have tremendous protection. You know, once they hit, under the Constitution, if they've been there a year, they're full-cause employees. So if they have an adverse action and they can't resolve it internally, they can go to the Employee Appeals Board. It's a third-party administrative lawyer appeal board. And then if they don't get the satisfaction there, they will go to tribal court. And by policy, we grant them that for-cause status after 6 months instead of the constitutional year. So there's a mechanism for somebody who believes they've been singled out to pursue now in the course of personnel process. If we create a cause of action for internally for in preference, what it will do, I believe, was appeal to those to manufacture frivolous claims, because the notorious claims will already have a path going to the Employee Appeals Board. And what the proposal suggests is creating a new agency that just listens to employees who don't think they got the raise or the promotion, or they got demerited or demoted because they were Indian. And in our environment, that just seems extremely unnecessary and attracts and begs mischief.
Councilman Hoskins?
I should not be having this argument with a labor lawyer.
You got a problem behind you.
Councilman England, please.
Gee, might be a little lighter than that. There's some folks in here that was I went to a pre-bid the other day. I was invited by a couple of subcontractors to go, and I've tried to stay away from that as much as possible, but they did invite me to go to this pre-bid, and I went out there, and I see some of these people that was there, and I've never seen such a disorganized pre-bid in my life. And I've talked to a couple of these people that was at that pre-bid later. I said, did you ever get any information from the pre-bid? And they said, no. Plinko didn't have one document ready. There was no plans. It was for the Kobe Keith restaurant, so that may clear it up. And I don't know who ended up with the project, but I know I talked to two, and there's one more I know that was there that I knew recognized after the fact. I was going to call them and see how they fared, but to me, it was all TERO vendors that was there, and it just basically wasted their time. The Flutco wasn't ready for to bid this project, but yet they throwed it out there. But then they was giving them a time frame, like next week we have to have this stuff, we have to start. There's nobody in there that had anything to even bid, so I don't know if the job ever let or what, but these are some of the things that I hear, from some of the, and I appreciate that they did invite this TERO contractors out, but I'm not sure any of them fared on that whole deal.
Well, I think that's...
I wouldn't have bid it, without going out that limit stock.
Well, I think that illustrates the point. Those problems are contractor, subcontractor issues of Plinko that I think we should study.
Mm-hmm.
If there needs to be enforced a different bidding process or protocol, that should be done, but this TERO Act will not address that.
Right, and I didn't believe it would, but I just kind of want to let you know that I did experience that just about 3 or 4 weeks ago. That some of these small contractors are still running up against the walls, that kind of thing. And as small as they are, there's no way they can put together a package that quick, the time frame that they had. And I don't believe that they should have been under that, quick of a time. I mean, I think Plinko should have been more ready.
Well, that's why I'm suggesting they study it. Was that an exception, or is that a systemic problem? And then if it's a systemic problem, we ought to fix it. If it's an exception, we need to get on to somebody.
And like I say, I know it's some people here that are there.
Councilman England, did you have any other questions or comments for the
And I
chief?
do agree with you on the deal about the bid should be exposed after the fact.
Now, I have Councilman Thornton next. Attorney Henry, was this to address what Councilman England just spoke about?
No, it's more of a general question, so.
Okay, then after Councilman Thornton.
Madam Chair, I have to take issue with the kind gentleman from Greasy. This body would not let me introduce a resolution a while ago. I'm not too sure why my co-counsel here gets to participate as a member of the council.
Because we
He's
pay
going to
his
ask
bill.
questions. Huh?
He works for us.
Okay.
After Councilman Thornton. Thank you, Chief. Councilman Thornton?
Yes, Chief, I wasn't going to make any statements, but I couldn't hold back.
I can't.
I agree with the councilman down here at the end of the table. Over the last 8 years, I've had several complaints, some involving the very same thing. He said that the bid is too soon. We don't have time enough to get one in. Other complaints, I've had a company that come in and they're a Cherokee name company. And they came to me and said, I've worked for every tribe that's 5 civilized tribes, and I cannot get a bid with the Cherokees. I don't know what the problem is. I don't know what the problem is. They're working down in Texas right now for a tribe doing the building. I brought that to CNE's attention, and they contacted these people. I don't know what happened. They'd already give up on Cherokee Nation. So that's one bidding company that we probably lost that was a good company. I really think we've got to do something about the contractors letting subcontract bids. We've got to have something to control these contractors. And I don't know what we could do, what we can't do, but they're letting, when they let bid to a subcontractor, and then that subcontractor lets another bid out here, and that subcontractor doesn't pay the subcontractor that they're letting the bid to, then we've got problems. It takes 6 months to 10 months to try to get something done to get these people paid. They've already done the job and can't get the pay.
See, and that's a contractual relationship between the sub
Yeah.
and the sub. And what we find on occasion is that the sub gets the job because he's Indian preference, and he'll sub it out to somebody who's not Indian preference. So he'll take a little cut off the top, and all the proposals or the policies are negated.
I'm saying something needs to be put in there, done, try to.
Well, it may be worthy of study, because contractors, they compete for the prime contractor, and it may be that we can develop our own internal bidding process that's standard. So whatever the contractor is, they have to follow our process. I think Councilman Gloria was talking one of the last sessions that the state has a process that's very simple, that the inspector actually determines when somebody is ready to be paid on the bridge project. And so the contractor doesn't have to submit invoices and such. He's there, he approves the work, he sends the paperwork in, and then it's paid out. So there may be some processes like that we could standardize on our business side, regardless of the prime contractor.
Councilman Thornton, do you have further questions?
Then, over these years, I've got complaints of treatment of our people, by contractors that's not treating them very well, and saying things around them that actually shouldn't be said. But then, you don't know. Like you said a while ago, complaints. And you don't know whether they're legitimate or they're not legitimate. But that's all good and well, but what I believe needs to be done is, and that's just what you said a while ago, is put teeth into this, but put it into it where you don't have to, I don't know, go back on and where there should be some proof of whatever has come up, and you can go back on the contractor, and TERO should be watching every one of these steps the way I look at it. That's just my thoughts now.
See, what you're discussing is that what TERO really started out to be is an equal
Well, I realize
employment
that.
opportunity advocacy for individuals. Then it took on the duty to certify individuals. And now we're at a stage that we're mixing programs. We've got a business center, one-stop business center, who tries to advocate for people to become more competitive. And we're trying to merge TERO to have them as an advocate in the contracting process. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I guess my suggestion is that if we need to standardize processes between prime contractors, that's something that C&E should be charged to do, or C&B.
Councilman Thornton, thank you. Now I have Councilman Buzzard and then Councilman Snell.
I just wanted to comment on what the chief said about TERO and how it works with Cherokee Nation employees, and I agree with you. I think that's too much of a move from what we've got now, and I feel like our Human Resources Department, Employees Appeal Board, I think those things are in place, and I think they work good. And I would not be for putting the TERO over. I agree with you 100%. The other thing, just a quick comment, is and I've already made it a while ago about in-state contractors. I just feel like that our preference should be our engine-owned contractors, TERO contractors. They should have a preference, and in some place, this contractor told me there was a 10% preference, for getting a job. If there is, I don't agree with that to be at 10%. Maybe we could look at a sliding scale of a certain amount of a contract. If it's $1 million contract, maybe we could do a 2% preference. Because as your contracts get larger, 10%, you can't live with something like that, and I realize that. That's the thing we probably need to look at if we're going to give preference to Indians, and I think we should, but I'm not sure how we're going to work that out.
See, the idea again that I think we should study about in-state and out-of-state. Does it accomplish the employment of Indians? The out-of-state contractor is probably as well prepared to hire local workers than maybe an in-state. And so there too needs to be some study.
Yeah, and I guess to say that, yeah, you're right. You're probably right about that. But the bulk of his money is going to go back to Alabama or Louisiana. The contract is going to go back. So I guess what I'm looking at is if we could keep our money here and let this money change within our Indian folks 3, 4, 5 times. You remember the guy, the doctor from talked about the Jews, the Jewish people, and it circulates 7 times within the Jewish community because they believe that, and that's how they do it. They buy from a Jewish person. Anyway, that's just my comments. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay.
No.
Now Councilman Snell.
The problems that I hear, most recent problems, is some of the subcontractors not getting paid on a timely basis. Like I know 2 or 3 or 4 had invoices as long as 120 days. Well, these subs, most of them can't go no 120 days without a paycheck. And they got, trying to run a business, and they just can't do it. And that's been most of the complaints I've heard.
And again, it's not the Cherokee Nation not paying them, it's the contractor not paying the subcontractor.
We was the contract on this particular.
And I'm aware of that case, and there's some dispute as to the work involved. I think we got.
Well, it wasn't only just this particular job that we're talking about. It's been on 2 or 3 or 4 of our jobs. So our Cherokee Nation jobs where they're not getting paid. So I think that those subs need paid when we get paid.
Well, the council passes a prompt payment act, so that's not, that's been addressed.
Well, that's my comment about that.
Councilman Snell, did you have any additional questions?
No.
Now, you weren't, when we did roll call, you weren't here. Did you want to become a member of this committee?
Yes.
Subcommittee? Do I hear a motion?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Unanimously approved. Thank you. Chief Smith, did you have any other comments about his? Okay, Attorney Hembry.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I'll leave it up to this committee and the council how to best use my services.
Madam Chair, I've got a couple of suggestions.
And I guess what we need to do here, and this subcommittee has been about this business for the last several months, is come to a core question, and I appreciate, that we have a lot of talented people here. I guess what I would want to ask the committee and anyone else, is the TERO Act that we have here today, is it adequate? If the answer is yes, our business would be short. If that answer is no, well then how do we go about changing it, and how do we add the strength to it, as this committee has previously made the position that it should apply to the Cherokee Nation. So, does anyone have any comments as to, is this an adequate act or not?
Well, and I think that my direction would be, if there's no objections from the committee, is that we will proceed with all the items that have been tabled previously and continue to go through, wrap it up today, that there would be a clean document that would show all the actions from this subcommittee presented at not this coming rules, but the next. So that would give us approximately a month and a half. Well, a month, assuming Mr. Hembry, Attorney Hembry, would get the changes made within 2 weeks for everyone to review it. And I believe we've been about this process for about 9 months, at least. And I know I've been about this for 6 years. So this is not anything new. And I'd like to make a few comments. I'll try to be brief. Is that we have been at this for some time. And I know part of my frustration has been a lack of a timely response when we've requested input on certain issues. And we're always honored to have you here, Chief Smith, but I understand with your schedule that you and Deputy Chief can't be here in front of us, and you have very competent staff, so I haven't understood at times why the staff hasn't come forward to present information to answer some of our questions and concerns that have created the concerns about enforcement and those things. Because really on face, the way I read and interpret the current TERO laws is it is very adequate when I look at how it does preference for both vendors, employee rights, both in hiring as well as promotion and those kind of things. On face value, if I were to go enforce it, it looks great. And we don't, at least from my perspective, I rarely ever have any issue with your shop, Chief Smith. It is rarely ever the Cherokee Nation. It's the leadership that's provided at our business entities on whether or not this is properly enforced or not. And that's throughout the organization. And all the decision makers that, whereas the tribe may get Cherokee preference, may get Indian preference, it doesn't always seem to filter out to our businesses who are sometimes have non-Indian decision makers, or even folks that may just simply carry a blue card and this is their first interaction with the tribe, to be frank. So I'm very glad to hear about the retainage issue, because I want it on record, although I'm not going to share like the actual business name or business owners. There is one Cherokee-owned business that is out over about approximately $3 million in retainage for a year. So, and I think that person deserves a response. And I don't know that we've provided them a response, and I'm so glad to hear that this will be addressed going forward. But I think that that's not the only issue, because I also sent to call you on your cell phone other individuals that were direct contract vendors. One being a pool provider, pool services. Just a simple pool, when you look at the economic impact, it's estimated at 3 times. So for every dollar we would put out in a Cherokee-based company, for example, in the 14 counties, or even in the state of Oklahoma, that dollar would really impact $3. That's, I think, a very conservative estimate. So I think your shop gets it. I think absolutely the tribal government understands that. They have relationships with the Cherokee community. Not all the folks, for example, I'll pick on my own district, not all the folks that work in the Catoosa shop have relationships, whether they have a blue citizenship card or not. They may have no interactions other than their immediate family with Cherokee folks. And that obviously means then that they have relationships with people that will influence the process, it seems, when you start talking to folks. And I really appreciate the idea of tiering, and I think that even under the law, the way it's written today, without action from the subcommittee or any further action from the council, could address both subcontracting and tiering. And I would hope that your administration and your staff would bring forward policy that you could govern, that we leave the flexibility with you, that shows that it's being properly administered. I mean, rather than us legislate, you could bring forward those policies, and maybe we do need to legislate it, but that should be a separate issue so that we can wrap this 9 months of work up. And we are looking at...
Can you tell me what tiering is?
Like, if you looked at tiering, that was, the example was, for example, if it was my world, and I was the decision maker, and I'm writing my check, I look for a Cherokee from Rogers County that has a business. I hire, my recycling's done by Cherokee from Rogers County, my pool's done from a Cherokee, I mean, so if I can, I try, and then the next tier would be a Cherokee from the 14 counties. And then the next out of that would be a Cherokee from Oklahoma or another Indian person that provides that. And so we could also do that. We absolutely, under the law today, it mandates that if they're not a core employee, which is somebody that has been retained with the company for at least 1 year and cannot be replaced, and they have to prove that to us, they are supposed to come in and hire Cherokees, even if that's just on a temporary basis only for our jobs, so that we do have that kind of influence with Cherokee hiring and Cherokee preference. I mean, in past administrations, I've heard them shutting down projects. I mean, there's these stories, right, about them going down and shutting down projects, whether they were Indian-owned or not, if they didn't hire local Cherokees, even on the spot. Now, we have a big shop. That probably can't happen today. I mean, but I don't see why, if all Cherokees and through or all people that are relying on the Cherokee Nation for their paycheck should understand the idea of preference and be working towards building relationships the same as they would with anybody from Las Vegas or anywhere else. So I think the law today already addresses many of these issues, and I don't understand why they're not going through. Now today we're going to wrap up this legislation, try to, and then the clean legislation will all have a month and a half, or a month at least, because it's going to be committed at 2 weeks, the clean legislation. So that before we get into rules, if there's a serious concern with the legislation, I would hope that we have documentation and a response from either from the staff, from you, Chief Smith, so that we can try to find some kind of working compromise that really helps the tribe. And I don't know, not all these decisions today, it may not come out, because the fundamental changes would be the decision on the commission and the decision on whether or not there would be cause of action against the tribe, which I don't know that I'm comfortable with, but I'm only a vote on this committee and the council. We've already discussed last time the increased fee, that we do think that there needs to be an increased fee because that has not been a showstopper. People will just pay the $25, I think it is, and just go on. There's no impact. So we did talk about that. And I'm curious, because the state contracting process was brought up, I believe, a month ago, and I haven't seen anything further on it, and I thought somebody else had taken that research. I didn't know if it was you or Councilwoman Jordan, but I haven't seen anything additional. But I don't know, again, that even requires a legislative change. I thought that may have been a policy that could have been implemented by the administration or our business entities. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, and I don't know how reflective that is of the body. But Councilwoman Fraley.
I'm not under your committee, but may I ask a question?
Please.
And from a business perspective, in regard to Indian preference, is there a way that we can strengthen this for you in your contracting actions that would help you to ensure that we have Indian preference?
Yeah, after hearing the discussion, I think a lot of the problem rests with the devil's in the details of enforcing all of this, because we have an incredible amount of process that goes on at the corporate level, and as the steward of this process at the business level, I have a personal interest in it. And I can tell you in response, Chair, that we spend a lot of time and effort to ensure that there is fairness at the selection level and that we protect the interest of the tribe in terms of preserving low cost, maximum profits, okay? And at the same time, balance the best contractor and the Cherokee contractor. Because we could give all of this work to Cherokee, no question about it. But the price will go up substantially if we just award and not preserve the economic process. I mean, if you look back at business history and the fundamentals of business, we have to have competitive bids and award, or it is all out the window. Because our prices will go up, the money to the Cherokee people will go down, our ability to employ more Cherokees will go down because we're not making as much money. So if I could say one thing, it is that you allow the businesses to preserve the competition, but be fair and work out the details so that when someone does do business with us, they do business in a profitable way. And that's where I think we need to focus, and that's getting people paid and making sure that it's fair and not holding up these crazy processes that don't allow them to do business. So I would like to see us look at that rather than enforce an overall new commission process that creates it. The cost will ultimately pass through to us, the tribe. When I say us, the tribe. So our current processes, I think, are good. They need, we can show increased payments to Cherokee vendors over the past 2 or 3 years that is stacked. I mean, it's incredibly good. We can show promotion of Cherokees at 80% level, it seems. We show our employment remaining 60% of Cherokees throughout our hiring of almost, 3,000 people, a couple thousand people. So the processes are working. It's just that it's not a perfect world, and we have to work on these details. And we are completely willing, we want to do that, because we spend a lot of our time selecting a vendor, for example, the pool. We all sat down in a room and made that decision. I mean, not me personally, but based on low cost, best bid, we have to make tough decisions. And that protects the nation, it keeps things competitive, but you know what, in business, there's a winner and there's always a loser to every business decision. And the loser is not happy. I mean, so every time there's a decision made, if it's not the right one, somebody's not happy. And so what we have to ensure, and what I believe you should ensure, is that we're following a process, that we're doing, I know you asked for the short version, I'm giving you the long version.
That's the wrong version.
That you ensure that we are following a process that's fair, that protects the integrity of the business process and competitive nature of business at the business level, and you allow us to do business. So that's my response. I think we can work on it. I think some of the provisions of this law are too invasive. It creates the definition of a vendor as an employer, which requires all of our vendors to follow the same rules that we do. So now we're dictating how they do business, which we don't need to get into. That destroys the competitiveness of the work.
Madam Speaker, did you have any other questions?
So
it's
anyway, I'm sorry.
It's not on a contract-by-contract basis then, I guess is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes.
Under the existing TERO law, it's not under a contract. If a TERO vendor signs up for TERO, they have to comply regardless of whether it's Cherokee Nation business or not. They have timetables that can be provided to them. They have all already. And I'm going to take issue with the pool deal because I was told differently that they were not provided with an open contract and they were not given details, so I'd like documentation on it actually.
We'll sit down and talk about that. But I'm just saying, it's not that we go without some process. There is process. It's not perfect. And, like your example, Jill, that's not a perfect process. It should be better. And in terms of paying the retainage, it should be better. But this has gotten so much better than it was a year or two ago. Incredibly better. And everybody is working tirelessly to make sure we don't make a mistake, but we do. So I would like to see us pinpoint these particular rules that we can improve on for the business operation of our Cherokee vendors. There is improvement to be made, but it's not as invasive as this law, I don't believe.
Chief, okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. Chief Smith.
I thank you for the compliment to our administration on, we get it in terms of hiring and practice. But the thing that you suggested cannot be accomplished by legislation. That, quote, people with a blue card develop community relationships and feed business to each other. There's no amount of legislation in the world can do that. So my real question is, you indicated that it's your desire to have this bill discussed and passed today. I'm not too sure why that is pressing if we haven't addressed the real core issues, and that is subcontractor compliance and retainage. I think that was the two issues that we've discovered in our research. I would suggest that whoever would like to visit with me and David and Diane and John Overacre as to where these core issues are, and there may be simple ways that we can ensure there's effective compliance rather than creating a burdensome and slow additional bureaucracy.
And Chief, I agree that that's an issue, but it's already in the existing law. We're not changing anything to do with that other than just to provide that it would be applicable to all. But you're saying you're already doing it, so that would be great to create trust with us. If there is compliance, would be to bring forward the specific devil in the details policy that we've never seen. It shows that the existing law is actually being implemented. So, but we're not addressing, we're expressing that there's ongoing concerns at the subcontractor and the subcontractor level, but the existing law already requires that there is tribal preference at all levels, and we're not addressing that. Councilman Thornton? Did you had your hand up?
Not to have my hand up, but I've got a comment.
And then,
as far as our businesses, and C&E and CNI and these people, I've run on to nothing but good out of H&R. And I had a complaint or two, and it turned out not being legitimate. But I had the broad aspects of looking into it. And you had a H&R supervisor back there. I think he's here, Mr. Brent Collins. Human Resources. And he could be more than what I wanted to look at. But it didn't take me long to look at it to see that you all are in compliance, and I appreciate what you're doing. And everyone that I have either recommended or sent to you, you all have dealt with them in a very professional way, and I appreciate that. My problem is like we're talking about, it's with probably governing the contractors in some way, and I don't know how we're going to do that.
Madam Chair,
I don't know if we can do it.
I've got a great resolution to that. Give it to Brent Thompson.
Yeah, that is
okay, David Stewart, and then we'll go back to our.
If I could make
could you come forward, please?
If I would make a request to clear the air on what we actually do, is that we would make a presentation to this committee or some committee that you would, or the entire council, on how we go about all of this. That way you can get a feel for what we're doing, and I believe we can do it as a matter of policy instead of having legislation, because it really, the policy has to be driven down through in a practical matter to really be effective. So if that's appropriate, I think the council can make a better decision if they actually know what we do in more detail rather than just hear it in bits and pieces. And I would welcome that if you would give us a chance.
Well, I guess I don't see that we are disagreeing. I think that we would like to see as a body that this be enacted, period, regardless of who's chief or who's sitting at this body or who is in the CEO position at C&E or CNI or CNB. And so we're just asking that the existing law be complied with, and to create trust between us is to bring those details forward, which we haven't seen. And I know this is my second round of TERO reform, and you and I both you've served as long as I have at the tribe, in 6 years, and so I know I'm ready to move forward to make sure that something is worked on.
Well, could I make a request then before that this legislation moves forward, if the council would give us a chance to relay, and communicate how we are complying with existing law and maybe some improvements or suggestions that we might make to make it more effective. I mean, that's my request, I guess.
Madam Speaker, is that okay during rules?
We could do it as a special rules meeting if it takes, knowing you, it'll probably take a while. So, do you want to do it as a special rules meeting or?
This body thanks you, Speaker Fraley, because I think that would be excellent in order to address it.
That would be appropriate. So
The subcommittee's ready to retire their work.
Okay.
When can you be ready?
Give us a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Is that okay?
So we could hold, okay, and we'll work together on it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, Councilman Baker.
Madam Chairman, while we have staff here and expertise and all of that, if I could take a minute and have Diane Kelly come forward. And she has expressed a couple of concerns to me that we as a body really need to be aware of if we're thinking about going to commission.
We would welcome Ms. Kelly's input.
It's deeper than we just don't have TERO is a big part of the problem, but I'll let her expound on that.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Back in the 80s, when we brought TERO to the Cherokee Nation, there were no TEROs in the state of Oklahoma. And I really take issue with a lot of the stuff that's being proposed because we worked hard to get this implemented so other tribes in the state could follow our lead to develop that. Indian preference has always been in the regulations. It had been there for years, but a lot of tribes were never actually following it. And a lot of the Department of Labor officials in Washington gave us some ammunition to put some of that TERO language in some of our programs. And then EEOC stepped forward with giving us some funds to implement those TERO offices. And Jim Wilcoxon was our general counsel at the time, and he worked with us because he said, I don't know that much about TERO, because we used a blueprint from a reservation to implement our act. And I can remember when we started it, it was to help get people employed. It was never intended to be a watchdog for all of our programs. It was never intended for that at all. When we started it, it was to work with all these federal contracts, these bridge jobs you see on the highway, all these highway projects. They are mandated by the federal government to hire minorities. And Don Greenfeather will tell you, he got a lot of people, a lot of road work. Because we did that in the beginning stages. It was through Chad Smith's administration and Julian Fite that we were able to put some teeth into this act that was passed in the 80s and go forward with some of the construction that we were doing. Julian said it's there. He said, I will back you. He said, go forward and issue those fees and those fines. And Chad backed us. And it was through the past council and this past administration that we were able to do some things with TERO that we've never done before. And when David Stewart told you that we've made a lot of progress, if you look back to the 80s, the 90s, and this is 2009 to be exact, and you look back from 4 years ago, and this is last administration, that's the only time we started enacting any fines. We never had a budget. We didn't really have much of a staff. We had 2 or 3 people. Don Greenfeather will tell you it was him and Willard Mounts for many, many years. And all they did was EEOC compliance. And that was outside the scope of the tribe. TERO was never designed for us to go in and enact working with people that were being dismissed by any of our entities or the tribal entities from an HR perspective. And when you go to these TERO conventions and you hear John Navarro and the people up there talk about TERO, they're telling you about the TERO on some of the reservations in the pueblos. And they only have sometimes about 1,000 members. Some of them only have 250 members. And when they tell you that they're basically serving as their contracts office or they're serving as their HR office, it's because on those pueblos and reservations, they're it. We don't have that. We have policies, procedures, we have HRs within all of our different entities. We have procedures that we're following. We have an administrative appeals committee. We have our JAT by constitution. And if you look at a lot of the other tribes, they don't even have a constitution. They're business boards. So I appreciate you allowing me the time because my staff are intermingled with career services. And when you look at the technical aspect of what TERO's doing, John Overacker works on strictly TERO. He's going to the bid table because we don't have enough staff to go and do some of those things. They're basically out there monitoring the contracts for any preference. They're doing the certifications and they're bringing those applications in. But when it comes to the budget, career services is handling the budget. When it comes to the technical or compliance, I'm handling the compliance. And one of the council members in here didn't even know that. And I've been doing it since the 80s. There was a short period in there I wasn't. But anyway, I'm just sharing that with you because the staff are not equipped to do some of the things that is being asked of us with some of this legislation. And I wanted to share that with you because the job bank falls in under career services. You got staff that are sitting in here that are paid out of career services that do the job bank. They also do the firefighter program. They fund bits and pieces of that. And when you look at our budget, we've gone forward and started doing some training with the fees that we're getting back in. And you were talking about CDL license. We've been doing some of that with some of our people that needed this because some of our contractors said that they needed these training things. So it's through the efforts of what has been done the last 8 years that we've been able to do what we're doing.
Okay. Councilman Hoskins, if you'll bear with me for just a moment. The budget shows that you have one full-time compliance, 2 full-time compliance officers paid with TERO, an administrative assistant full-time, a job business development coordinator, and then there's a director of E&T programs, which is 20%, a manager of employment development, which is 70%, and a manager of employee development, which is 30%. So there's 3 that have mixed, but you have 4 full-time.
Well, there's others that aren't even appearing on that budget that do work.
Okay.
For TERO.
Just wanted to clarify that. Councilman Hoskins.
Yeah, kind of to that point, is it merely a staffing issue to comply with this, or is the underlying policy that we're going after the problem?
It's the policy that you're going after, because we're not in place to be a watchdog, and that's basically where I see some of the legislation going, based on some of the comments and discussions that I've had with some of you all in regards to some of the things that you were asking us to do, because the staff are not trained to do some of those things. They're trained to be job developers, going out and finding people jobs, working with training programs. That's basically the scope of their work.
Let's assume there was adequate staff and they were trained to be watchdogs. Is it a real problem that they shouldn't be watchdogs? Is that, I mean, I'm not...
If you have policies in place, Councilman Hoskin, as the chief pointed out, and it's got some teeth with it, you don't need that. And right now, we have the mechanism through all of our different entities to put that policy in place through your administrative piece, which is your contracting, or your HR offices for that matter. But your contracting offices, your acquisition management offices, they're the ones that can put their policies together to do that. They're the ones that put the bids together, RFPs that go out. We don't do that. We sit at the table and tell them we're there to help with finding the Indian people to do the job if they can't come up with it. We're there to enact the fees if they don't comply. Jody called me, two Sunday mornings ago. I was on my way to the airport, or I probably would answer the phone, but at 7 o'clock in the morning, she called me. She said, "Don, I'm at the landfill. We got Mexicans out here." And I called Dale Gibson. He got up out of bed and went out there on a Sunday morning. Thank you, Dale.
I guess we're blessed with people that responded to Jody's phone call, and I guess maybe the concern is what if our successors pick up the phone one day and no one answers? And, you know, you guys are enforcing your policies now and are very vigilant, but I guess we're thinking way down the road. And so that's why I'm curious is if you really have an issue with the whole underlying policy, apart from the staffing issues, and it sounds like you do.
Yeah. We were a commission in the beginning, and John Eckelhoff with the Native American Rights Fund had his brother, who was an engineer at the time, come out and work with us, and we had to change some of our wording in order to get our funding through EEOC because of the way Oklahoma is looked at from the other tribes. Because we're not looked at as a reservation, but the whole state of Oklahoma is looked at as a reservation state.
I mean, did you, I may be asking, putting additional burdens on you, but I mean, have you had the opportunity to look through all of the proposals and sort of summarize the specific, and I'm not asking you to do that now.
No, I have. In fact, I've got it all marked up. I've looked at it about 5 times because this was legislation that was proposed by the last council, because if you look at the back page, I believe Linda O'Leary's name is on there, Melvina Shop Pouches, and several other people. And I know that you all were going through this as a subcommittee, and I apologize if I wasn't here at every one of the meetings, but I know that there were some meetings that we were not actually invited to, so that's why I didn't know whether we were or we weren't. Sometimes we were, sometimes we weren't. But we would like to have the opportunity to sit down with some of the terminology and the language that's proposed, because there's some of it that is not in line. See some body language that.
And for the record, Ms. Kelly, all of our meetings are public meetings per the Cherokee Constitution, so you are always welcome. I don't know how Chief Smith feels about your attendance, but you are always welcome at these meetings.
Well, there was some emails that said there was like 5 people that was invited.
We have had side meetings trying to address this outside of legislation, but apparently the body doesn't feel like those have addressed everything. But those didn't meet Open Meeting Act requirements and such, and that would have been up to Chief Smith if we had insisted. But there were times we did want to have very candid discussions with Chief Smith about particular situations, which, didn't necessarily need to involve staff if they got heated, to be frank. So
there is some language, and I think Marvin Jones, if he was here, he'd probably tell you, HUD has been doing their reviews for the last several years, and they have taken issue with our TERO Act. Because there is some language in there that they take issue with, and whether or not it is being complied with or being followed. And Indian preference is something that HUD looks very closely at, but they also want to know how we're treating other Indians. So I wanted to point that out, because from the federal side, because we do some federal projects, that is something that would have to be looked at. And shalls and mays.
You do have Section 3 funding, which I think would assist with that. The way I understand the HUD definition comes down, and it's not being spent, so you have extra money if you need to hire somebody, I guess.
No, it's for training purposes, and it is going to be spent.
Most excellent. I appreciate that. Councilman Buzzer?
Just to comment on what Diane is saying, and what she said is, mainly their job is, and to follow up on Councilor Hoskins' job development and training, and not so much enforcement. Well, it looks to me like that what we're talking about is enforcement. And she's probably right. That's what their job is, for training and job bank, and not so much enforcement. But I think that's probably what we're looking at, is more enforcement, along with the training that you're doing, Diane. So thank you for those comments. I think you made a good point.
Well, if you recall, you all asked us to place a couple of people, one at West Highland and one at Catoosa. And if I'm not mistaken, there was some discussion about whether or not they would be a full-time employer on contract, and I think it was brought up that maybe they should be put on contract. Well, we went forward with that, but we're not getting very many bites, because in this day, in this economy, people want some stability. And if you want somebody good, you're not going to find anybody on a contractual basis.
And just a follow-up comment on that, Diana, if you don't put somebody in there that's used to know what TERO is, it'd take a year to get them trained up, so, and you know that. Thank you.
Ms. Kelly, did you have anything else you want to share with us? Did anybody in the committee have additional questions for Ms. Kelly? Okay, we have 8 items, which thank you, Ms. Kelly. We appreciate you being here. We have 8 items that I can count that have been tabled, including the commission. So this subcommittee needs to take action, if at all possible, one way or another, so that Attorney Hembry can create a clean document which we can take another look at for the special rules committee that will be called by Speaker Fraley.
Madam Chairman, as to the commission, that was considered and was passed.
Okay, so we have actually 7 items. Okay.
And as was stated earlier, the prompt payment was made,
Attorney, just to be clear, the records by the secretary is that at the end of the meeting, Councilwoman Gloria Jordan made a motion to table after we had made amendments to the commission amendment, and those had passed, but we did not make a motion to approve or forward yea or nay on the commission as a whole in that language.
so then I stand corrected.
It's okay, well, so we'll address that at the very end. Let's go ahead and go through these other issues. I believe you can start with section 25, or you can start at the very beginning where there's some other items that look like they were still tabled, so.
Madam Chairman, what I would suggest is that the prompt, section 26, the prompt payment has been called out as a separate action.
Right.
So if that becomes law, it will be incorporated into the TERO Act. So section 27, if you look there, it's just changing Judicial Appeals Tribunal to Cherokee Nation Supreme Court.
Do I hear a motion to approve?
Make a motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. So that language has been corrected.
Okay, and on the last one is section 31, filing of reports. The current law says employees shall submit reports and other information requested by TERO, and the additional language is and as required by this act.
Do I hear a motion to approve? Second? Anyone?
Second.
All those, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
That would conclude the undiscussed or new amendments,
We did
and
not
then
take
it would be,
action on section 25.
we would go back to section 25. Section 25 is a tabled amendment, which strikes section 25D, which states this title does not provide any course of action for employees of the Cherokee Nation, its entities, or wholly owned corporations. It would replace the language, TERO vendors or employees shall be able to bring complaints against the Cherokee Nation Enterprises, Cherokee Nation Industries, and any other entities of the Cherokee Nation. In a sense, creating an employee cause of action.
Do I hear any motion to take this off the table? Councilman Thornton.
Madam Chair, I would like to listen to David Sturt's comments 2 weeks before we do anything else with this section.
If the committee will indulge me, we really do provide, because I would never want to, and I'm debating this issue, it's not on the table, but I think my intention in this would be that we create an avenue outside of the company, and that's already provided for in the Act later on, and it's that appeals from the decisions of committee, which exists today, it just refers to JAT. So I would be opposed to this, I'll just tell you that. That doesn't mean that this body can't pass it, but I don't know that we want to open up to lawsuits, which is what it is. And it's almost like a blanket waiver of sovereign immunity for anybody that does business. Although we want teeth in it, that's not.
I'll make a motion to strike D.
I'll second that.
Or, no, it would be to keep D as is, right?
Keep it, yeah, as it is.
Okay, and it's been seconded by Buell. Do I hear any comments? I know Councilman Crittenden, you had your hand raised.
No, that's fine.
Okay, seeing no other comments, all those in favor to keep D as is, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. So we'll keep that. Thank you. We're going backwards. Yes, because we have to have. Hold on for just a minute, we got to count the quorum.
How many people are in the committee?
We have 8 and there's 14, I believe, now that we've added.
7, 8. We have 8 and we got one.
Okay.
12 members.
We've maintained quorum. Thank you, Attorney Embry. You want to go backwards, or do you want to start at 5 and then go to 24?
Whatever the pleasure of the council is.
Let's just.
Can we speed this process up just a little longer?
We're trying.
Okay.
Keep us on task, though. All right, Dave. So Section 5, Authorities and Duties, Section E. And this has to deal with the setting a quota 4 numerical hiring goals. And this was tabled. So do we want, the body could decide that if you do not make a motion, it will stay as is and we leave it off. We don't bring it off the table. So if there's no motion to bring it off the table, it dies. And there'll be no need for David Stewart to talk if it dies. So I'm trying to move this along. Okay. So hearing no motion to bring that off the table, that dies. Then we have X, the audit compliance on an annual basis, including all employers, including but not limited to Cherokee Nation and any other entities which the Cherokee Nation owns a majority interest. This speaks to compliance. It would incur additional cost. The committee needs to weigh whether or not this is something that we need to do, especially if we're beefing up employees and that we'll have people on site on an ongoing basis. Do we really want an additional cost for doing an annual audit? And it would include groups such as the Cherokee Heritage Center.
Please. Is there already an annual audit on these?
This would be to speak to TERO and the Indian preference. So that at this point, to my knowledge, there's no audit just on Indian preference and see if like contracting and hiring and promotion. I'll just throw this out and suggest it to the committee. I think this is something additional outside of maybe our discussion that maybe needs a lot more. It could be a separate amendment at a different time if it strikes somebody as necessary. And I'll be happy to work with whoever. So if I hear no motion to bring it off the table, then this 2 will die. I'm seeing that, okay? We have 2 more items, including the commission. So, do I hear a motion to approve a commission to be added, an independent commission to be added to the TERO? And then this would be considered in full at the Special Rules Committee meeting. So it could still be stricken or amended at the Special Rules Committee meeting if you added it today.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, anything, once this act is put forward to the full Rules Committee or Special Rules Committee, any amendment, deletions can take place also at that full committee, and also at full council by that matter.
Because at this point, we've made so many amendments and tabled so many things over 9 months, I think it's a little bit confusing. I know I went back and reviewed everything prior to this meeting.
When what's called is saying anything that we take off of here
You'll
can be
have,
added at the end if we want to bring it back.
yes. But if you want to consider a clean, whatever the amendments we made with the commission at the special rules, it would be easier to probably add it now and delete it at that point than to add it later, unless you want to bring a special amendment and we have to get it ready for that.
I want to listen to what David Stewart has said to me. I don't want to add this thing.
Okay, so I'm
But that's
hearing
the way I
no
feel.
motion for a commission to be brought forward.
Right.
Okay, so that is dead as of right now unless it's brought forward at special rules. And we have one last section is from my record, section 24, and that's filing of complaints by TERO. And I'm going to highly suggest to the committee if you make a motion to include this language that we strike or any citizen of the Cherokee Nation, because I don't believe they would have cause if they're not employed or being a vendor. They're not party to whatever the action is, and we can have some of our favorite individuals bringing all sorts of craziness to the process and hampering just because they heard a rumor out in the community. I don't think that helps any of the people we're trying to serve. And so if you do bring forward a motion, I would hope that you strike the or any citizen of the Cherokee Nation.
I'll make a motion that we bring forward a complaint may also be initiated by a TERO vendor and employee. Period.
So that would include
But can they already do that?
non-citizens. I think we're just spelling it out. Attorney Hembry?
Well, if it's the will of the council not to give an employee a cause of action, you would strike employee.
I would like to offer a friendly
Any citizen of the Cherokee
amendment.
Nation?
Strike the employee also, just strictly a TERO vendor.
I'll take that.
Okay, so all minds are clear. The section 24, for the filing of complaints, would be that a complaint may also be initiated by a TERO vendor. Period.
Okay.
Are all minds clear? Is there any discussion?
Was there a second to that?
Seconded by Buell England with the friendly amendment, which was accepted by Councilor Thornton.
Okay.
If all minds are clear, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay. I don't have any record, Secretary Britton or Attorney Hembry, do you have any record of additional items that need to be considered for action?
No, I believe that takes care of it. I would incorporate these changes into a clean act be forwarded to the
Within
rules
2
committee.
weeks. And please include the chief and Ms. Kelly and David Stewart. And mail it Secretary Knight so that she can forward to others for consideration. Very briefly, I appreciate the time of the committee and the work of everybody involved and the chief and his staff. Thank you very much. I appreciate your patience. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same time. We are adjourned. Thank you.